Um, we'll go ahead and get started. Let me introduce myself just briefly. My name's Hans Magleby. I am one of the founders of WhyTry. Um, my background is I have a degree in art. I was an art teacher. I was also the art director for a video game company. I've got a lot of years experience working with kind of technology and media, and I think I've kind of specialized. My specialty has been, how to incorporate those things and use them for student engagement. And I'm I'm one of the developers of the WhyTry program, the Resilience for Youth program, and kind of have led that development. And I train on this, and have been a consultant and trainer for educators all over the country for the past 2 decades, 2+ decades. My colleague that's on here is Bruce Bushnell. Bruce is a retired school counselor. He was an award-winning counselor, was the counselor of the year here in the state of Utah, where we're located. He also won a national award as a school counselor and was honored. We were kind of joking about this. He was honored at the White House by the Secretary of Education years ago at a
President
ceremony that they
Bush.
held in the Rose Garden, which is
Yeah.
no longer in existence. Now it's a paved piece of concrete with future gold gilded ballroom being built. So, um, but Bruce has been also, kind of a key player here with the WhyTry organization since our early days and has been really instrumental in helping us add a lot of what we do in our program that relates to experiential learning and activities. And so we're both really excited to have you on today. Bruce, you want to say anything else?
No, I just say Hans is gifted in many ways that make things engaging. He's really helped a lot with our curriculum and our training because of his background, and he's got a special gift in that. And I've loved being an educator. I was a high school counselor for 26 years, a teacher for the first three, then a high school counselor and a basketball coach. But I love working with youth, and that's my passion is to make a difference. And I hope we do something today that will make a difference for you as we get into this.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bruce. We've been doing these webinars since COVID hit. We started out doing these just when everybody was on lockdown, and kind of the way we were operating and doing our training and speaking at conferences and presenting all had to kind of change up. And so today, um, we've just tried to keep it going and have opportunities where we sometimes will bring in different guest presenters and people from around the country, working with different background and experience, dealing with different challenges and issues, and sharing their expertise and insights. Um, Today, we wanted to just provide a little workshop for you centered around this topic, helping students manage emotions, make better decisions, and stay engaged. And we want you to be able to kind of see some of the resources and approach that we follow here organizationally and as part of kind of the work that we do. And this isn't just going to be theory and talking about things. We're going to provide some great free resources for you at the end of this. And so um, we wanted to start off sharing one of our lessons that we have, one of our units in the WhyTry program that focuses on motivation and having a resilient mindset. Kind of the learning objectives of this lesson are focusing on helping students be resilient by using challenges to fuel their motivation. So recognizing, we can't take away the challenges that our students have. So we're trying to help them understand how they can, depending on how they view their challenge and how they tap into it, it can become a source of fuel or a source of motivation for them. Um, Practicing positive self-talk and finding support to help them succeed. So these are kind of the learning objectives for this lesson. The key principle that we're teaching is focused on that concept of where does motivation come from internally, and what can we do as educators to motivate our students? And then how can we teach them to be intrinsically or internally motivated? And then having just sort of that mindset of resilience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this metaphor, kind of probably just the first half of this. This is one of our lessons, and it kind of covers sort of the first half of this metaphor that we call the motivation formula. If you're not familiar with Why Try, one of the things that makes us probably unique and different from most other programs and resources out there is the way that we use visual metaphors. And it's something that we kind of stumbled on years ago. My business partner, Christian Moore, who's a clinical social worker, he kind of discovered as he was working with kids, trying to teach them some of the things in his life experience that he has learned that have helped him to be resilient. He was just talking to kids and they wouldn't listen. And so he started doing things to try and engage them differently. And he was consulting with one of his colleagues, a school psychologist, and she was sharing with him, you know, the idea of multiple intelligence theory and different learning styles and how kids learn differently. And he just observed that when he talked to kids, they often wouldn't listen. And so he started drawing pictures for them. And it was a completely different experience. He would draw these pictures that were, something that related to their life. It was kind of a metaphor of what was going on in their life. And he would process with them and ask them questions, and they'd give him answers, and he'd put these answers on these metaphors. And it was like a very different experience for how they could not just see this as a simple picture, but see it as something that connects to them and their experience and help them understand something that's kind of a complex or hard thing to understand, but they could understand it in context to the visual metaphor itself. And so everything that we do starts with a metaphor. We make it engaging through the use of stories and examples, activities, music, art, media, all different kinds of things that we do to try and make it engaging and relevant for our students. But it begins kind of with this concept. So in this case, we're talking about challenges. Some of the supporting skills that we teach in this lesson relate to having resilience under setbacks, helping students be more optimistic and more hopeful, intrinsic motivation, so that, where we find that internal motivation and how to kind of channel our challenges into fuel for motivation, focusing on goals, seeking support, having positive self-talk and persistence through adversity, just in general. So, we have these pre-built lessons in our toolkit, and our toolkit is just it's all created through our website that our customers have access to. We have all these different resources, and then we have pre-built lessons in different grade level bands and scopes and sequences. And this is just one of them we wanted to share today. And we're going to share all these resources with you at the end of the webinar. So you can have these and try them out with your students to see what you can do to help address some of those challenges. Usually when we start off, we always have a simple little attention getter slide in our deck for our lesson. Sometimes they're just kind of a fun, lighthearted thing that doesn't have a strong connection to the skill or the principle that we're teaching. Sometimes they're kind of a lead-in discussion. This one today, in this lesson is just sort of a thought-provoking question. When something gets really hard, which feels tougher to deal with? And just out of curiosity, in the chat window, just give me a quick response if you can. Is it harder for you to deal with a problem you didn't see coming or a problem you saw coming but you couldn't avoid? Just out of curiosity. And maybe why, if you feel like that. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. So we got a lot. Seems pretty evenly dispersed. A lot, though, are saying number one. I think that might be a little bit more. Yeah, I know. I don't know. I think for me, sometimes when you don't see it coming, it's harder for me to um, manage my emotions. It's really easy to get upset when something unexpected happens, and when I do see something coming, even though I can't avoid it, maybe I'm able to prepare myself a little bit better. I think that's just me personally. I don't know, Bruce, what's your thought?
I'm too also. I mean, I feel like if I can see it coming, at least I can check into resources and do something about it. I may not be able to fully avoid it, but maybe I can deal with it and cope with it better than if it just comes out of the blue.
So you'd prefer to, it's not the
I
tougher
prefer
thing for
to.
you. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, again, this would be something with your students you could just have a simple discussion, talk about why, and it kind of relates to what we're going to be talking about in this lesson, which is how we view our challenges and how we handle challenges. And sometimes there are things that you can't avoid and you can't control. Um, Sometimes there are things that are unexpected and you don't see coming. And so in both cases, we're having to deal with those on a regular basis. So one of the little activities that we have that goes along with this lesson, it's just an object lesson, is this one. It's called Balloon Pop. And I'm going to just throw a question up here. Um, and if you could, in the chat window, just share with me real quickly, what's something that annoys you? Is there anything you can think of that just is annoying to you sometimes or, kind of gets under your skin? Okay, we got some good ones here. So now typically I would do this with a group of students, put it on a whiteboard and kind of write some of their responses. I'd have a student volunteer to come up and write down some of their responses. Okay, so we've got a lot here. So for each one of these, no, I'm not going to do it for each one, but for some of these, so we've got. Why don't you read some for me, Bruce, and I'll in the chat window, and I'll kind of illustrate how we handle this.
People are disrespectful, people lying to me or lying to my face, bad manners, not listening, talking with food in your mouth, leaving messes, being excluded from decisions or mouth breathing, chewing loudly. One I was going to put down was the one
Chewing
I was going to
loudly.
put down is
Oh,
bad drivers. We had several bad drivers.
why is it? Chewing loudly is one that gets me too. It drives me crazy. Rude
Uh,
people. So for
is
each one, as I'm going, I'm kind of adding to this. I've got other ones. What's something that makes you mad? Kind of a similar thing. You can be answering those or something that frustrates you. So any of those.
bad
Um,
drivers, laziness. Oh,
oh, all right. So, man, I hate that. That actually caught me off guard. Wasn't expecting that to pop so quick. So for each one of these, I'm just kind of building and blowing a little bit in my balloon as we're adding some of these challenges, some of these things that we might experience on a daily basis, either at home, at school, with our friends. Those are kind of the three main environments we often focus on with our students. And so, having that discussion, what's something that frustrates you? Then I like to just have a quick processing moment with our students. So, a couple questions here. We'll ask, why did the balloon pop? Well, obviously, we had increasing pressure building up inside it, right? Every time I'm adding a little bit of air to the balloon, it's getting tighter and tighter until eventually it bursts. It kind of lost its ability to maintain its shape, right? In real life, what does that look like when somebody pops? In the chat window, what would you say? Is there ever a moment in life where somebody pops kind of like my balloon just did? Like how would you describe it? What does that look like? Yeah, awesome comments here. So yelling, anger, crash out, storming out, a
meltdown.
meltdown, flip your lid, rage, screaming, lose control, crying, snap, act out of character. I think that's something you see a lot, you act out in a way that's not what you want to be doing, or it's kind of out of character for yourself. Sometimes you've kind of lost control, right? I think you see that a lot. There's a lot of um, loss of that emotional regulation that we have, right? We just when you pop, it's like you've kind of let go of some things and you explode. Um, what usually happens to relationships, opportunities, or trust when somebody reacts instead of responds? How does that impact some of those relationships or opportunities, things that we experience when you just react? Love it. So damaged, people get hurt. It creates distrust, um, you know, diminishes the relationship. People pull away. Um, it builds caution in others, creates fear. We lose respect. Love those. Really good answers, you guys. Why do some people react to the items that we just listed, in the chat window there, or if it would be in a classroom, on the board in a negative way, and others do it in a positive way? You think about that in life sometimes. Why is it that some people react to those challenges negatively, where others are able to react in a more positive way? I like this. So, they have coping skills, Christy said, um, their balloons are already highly inflated, but it's not visible. They know it, but no one else does. Um, there's a level of emotional control and coping skills. Um,
Angela said resiliency.
I love that. Rochelle said the way they were raised, so something in what they've been taught has helped them. And I like that because I think that implies for us that this is something you can teach, right? It's not something that is just outside of the scope of what we're able to help our students learn when they're in school. These are things that we can focus and change and build. Um, they're practicing it, so resiliency. They're positive, well rested, and calm. They're good at regulating their emotions, and they have strategies for calming them and not letting them get to the point where they boil over. So, um, here's a question: just is it okay to be angry? And if so, why or why not? Everybody, yes, 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 yes. I love it, right? Of course it is, right? It's a natural emotion. Keith said, it's the action that needs to change, not the emotion. Anger is a valid emotion. How you express it matters, right? The problem can be with what you do with it. It's what you do with that anger that makes a huge difference. I think you all, as educators and as adults, have learned and dealt with this throughout your life. We all struggle with it, I'm sure. Um, this is one of my favorite questions in follow-up with this is when does anger become not okay? Is there situations where anger is not okay? What do you think about that? When it's out of control, when it turns from assertive to aggressive, when it hurts others intentionally. I love that. Anger is not okay when it's based on misinformation. Interesting. That's an interesting perspective. And I think we can all relate to that right now. Um, when it becomes uncontrollable, when it turns into violence, especially directed at others, right? When you hurt yourself and you hurt others. Yeah. I love those. So the second half of this activity is something that we like to kind of focus on. What are some things we can do to channel the anger, the energy from what you guys listed as we talked about the things that annoy you or the things that make you mad or the things that frustrate you? What are some things we can do to channel anger or energy from those things that you listed? So if you listed something, now think about what is something that we can do to channel that kind of in a way that we listed into positive motivation. So in this case, while you guys are listing those, Bruce, you can start reading some of them off if you
Okay.
want.
Deep breathing, write it down to externalize it, speak up for yourself, breathe, seek information, choose love, a loving stance,
Yeah,
journaling,
maybe I'll let it out better so it squeaks.
uh, self reflection, good coping skills, workout. Don't let it build up. Make a positive move. Sports, athletics.
So with each of these, just as an object lesson, with your balloon, I'm letting some of the air out and kind of letting it regulate. And maybe something happens.
Take a
I get
walk.
annoyed again and it fills up a little bit more. But each time I'm looking at something that is we're identifying that can help me channel that anger or energy into positive motivation, then I'm helping regulate that pressure and my balloon's regulating. So let's process that just for a minute. What happens when we channel our anger in positive ways? I'll put a couple of these questions up here. How do you get motivated to channel anger in a positive way? Why is it important to channel our anger? Pressure decreases, we feel better, things can get done, we calm down. Um, and I think of how do you get motivated to channel anger in a positive way? To me, I like to think of the anger as not something that I want to get rid of. I like to think of it as something that I can use. And it kind of motivates me when I do feel angry to then think of how can I be productive with this? You know, um, my youngest son, he has struggled with ADHD, his whole life. I think my wife and I have spent more time helping him work through some of his challenges, and he struggles with emotional regulation. Always has. He really quickly gets easily agitated and hyper focuses on things that are distracting for him. And he's struggled in relationships with other kids. And I remember years ago, I came home from work, and this was when he was in about third or fourth grade. And my wife said, his name's Rock. She said, Rock's in timeout. We go talk to him. So I went in and talked to him, and he was sitting in our timeout chair. And I could tell he had been crying. He had had a rough day. He had been in a fight with his older brother and his little sister, and that's why he was in timeout. So we talked about that. And then we talked about school. And he said at school, some kids were calling him a bully. And um, he is a big kid, always has been. He's pretty intense. And I thought he could be a bully. We talked about the attributes of a bully, and he kind of admitted, he said, Dad, I admit I've done some of those things, but it's been a long time since I've done those. And I don't like it. I haven't, I've been trying to be different. I've been trying to be nice. I haven't done anything like that all year, and they're still calling me a bully. And I just said, well, okay, I can see that. If you can just keep, it's normal that you feel the way you do. And it's normal that you're angry, but if you can just keep being the nice kid that I know you are, y- y- that label will go away. They'll stop calling you a bully. And then he said, yeah, but it just makes me so mad. And so I remember sitting there trying to get him to let go of his anger and not like get rid of it. And I remember talking about it, and then I realized, what am I doing? I know better than this. And I told him, I said, you know what, Rock, you don't need to get rid of your anger. It's okay that you're angry. That's normal. Just like you all said, it's important to recognize that's a normal emotion that we all experience and we all feel. And so I tried to help him see he loves sports. And I said, is it easier to practice basketball when you have a lot of energy or you don't have any energy? And he's like, well, when I have more energy. And I said, so instead of getting rid of your anger that you're feeling, what if you take it when you feel angry like this and go use the energy from that anger to practice dribbling and shooting your basketball? Is that something you could do to take it and use it to be productive? And it was like a light bulb comes on for him just as this little third, fourth grader, and he realizes that, yeah, that's something I can do. And to this day, we still are always trying to help him see that and channel that kind of energy into some positive direction. So why is it important to channel our anger? It can be a powerful thing for us when we take those challenges, we take that emotion and try and channel it in a positive direction. How would your life be different if your anger was controlled? And what kind of opportunities could you have if you channeled your challenges into a positive direction? So there's some additional processing questions you could do with this one. So, Bruce, do you want to set this up? This is a little video that
Yeah,
goes along with the lesson.
this is a inspiring short video that I love. I was a basketball coach, so it has a lot of meaning to me. But this is a young man by the name of Jason Elway. He has autism. He has challenges, learning challenges, and other things. But this is a video I want you to watch how he works through his challenges and how people around him support him or help him or reach out to him. And I'm going to ask at the end for you to put in anything that you thought was really meaningful that you've picked out from this video. It's not very long. If you've seen it before, I've seen it a lot of times, and I cry a lot, so you'll see me probably get emotional, even though I've seen it. So Hans, go ahead and play it, and then we'll come back and talk briefly about it.
Greece Athena High School in Rochester, New York, has a new, most unlikely hero, a special ed student by the name of Jason McElwain.
Just keep it going.
Jason is the basketball team manager. For the past couple years, he's been assisting Coach Jim Johnson, helping with whatever the team needs.
And go! Get them motivated and hand out water and just be enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic, to say the least. Despite being born with autism, Jason's father says his son has never had a problem expressing himself at basketball games.
You know, I was always concerned that he might get a technical and they lose a game because he, start yelling or whatever.
Let's have a hard practice tomorrow, all hour and a half, and let's get ready for Arcadia. Let's go.
1, 2, 3, 2.
Because he has been so devoted to the team, for the last game of the season, Coach Johnson decided to let Jason actually suit up. Not to play necessarily, just to let him feel what it's like to wear a jersey.
At least that was the plan. But with 4 minutes to go in last week's game, Coach Johnson stood up and pointed to number 52, Jason McElwain. After years of fetching water and toweling off other people's sweat, Jason was actually in a game. His first shot was a 20-footer from the right baseline.
Was it close? Did you almost make it?
I just airballed it.
I'm like, just, dear God, please, let's just get him a basket.
His second shot missed too, but the third was a charm. A three-point no-doubter. And Jason wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot.
If I wasn't there to witness it, I wouldn't have believed it,
You caught fire.
I just caught fire. I was hot as a pistol.
Jason ended up shooting 6 3-pointers, one right after the other. He had 20 points total, and each time a shot went in, his teammates and the crowd went a little crazier. His last basket, right at the buzzer, created total mayhem. Because he is autistic, Jason says he's used to feeling different, but never this different. Never this wonderful. Steve Hartman, CBS News, Rochester, New York.
That's pretty amazing. Just to put in the chat window just for a second, we've been using a lot, but just before we put the questions up, and we'll just let them see the questions. But what stood out to you? What was a lot of hearts going up, and it is it gets me emotional. I'm trying not to go there because I don't want to go there today. But what stood out to you? What was meaningful to you, and how did the people around him support him? Who's cutting onions?
Every marginalized human should experience this. I love that, Keith.
Yeah. What a lot of hidden talent. Makes you wonder about the coach a little bit. I mean, I've been a high school basketball coach for 14 years, not recently, but he came in and his first basket came about the 3-minute mark, and he ended up with 20 points. 20 points in any game is phenomenal. But to do it in 3 minutes or less and 6 3-pointers, that's off the charts. But they're saying his peers cheering for him. He didn't, he got support. His coach supported him. His parents supported him. The students in the stands supported him. And being a coach, usually when you put people into the game at the end of the game, they're kind of selfish. They want to be in the newspaper the next day in a high school game, and they should just put it up. You don't score 20 points in 3 minutes unless you have what in your hand, the ball. His teammates knew this is kind of his shining moment, and they got him the ball. And so that's kind of, we talk about it in the class sometimes. How can we support each other better in school? Be aware of each other's needs. And I don't know if you saw his teammates, when he made his first 3-pointer, their vertical jump was probably higher than they jump in practice. They were so excited for his success. and how can we be more excited for each other's success? So you can take a video, but you can make it really something that brings kids in to lead into what you want to teach, or you can play this after you teach the visual metaphor and then go down through it. Let's just see some of the questions, Hans, that we have. We're not going to take. We've done a lot. We want to make sure we get to everything. But how do the students react when Jason entered the game? It's kind of, they all
No,
sit up and
you know
cheer.
that first one thing I love about that, Bruce, is that they were not only super excited as he was going into the game. That tells you something. They knew him. They knew his challenges. They knew why this was important to him. And it's kind of hard to see, but you can actually see some of the students in the student section had little face, little cutouts of his face that they were holding up, like little posters with his face on it. And so
They were
they
prepared
came
for it.
knowing this was going to be an opportunity for him and how important it was. And they were so excited to support him, which I think is awesome.
And how do you think they felt about Jason that we just saw it? We witnessed it. And what were some of his challenges? Well, he still used positive self-talk. He said, I airballed my first shot. I just airballed it. I missed it. But he says, I got hot as a pistol. But the key is he kept on shooting. And how does his team support him? And they were supporting him from the bench, on the floor. Well, it's kind of self-explanatory. And his attitude, how would you describe his attitude? Throwing that out to you. How would you describe his attitude? It's kind of obvious, but
I think that's why his teammates
he shows
were so
grit,
happy for him
positivity.
because
Uh,
he's
op-
always been there and had that positive attitude.
right.
I mean, he even said, you know, to get him water and help motivate him and, be supportive.
He
And
led him in the chair for the let's have a hard practice today. He was persistent. He didn't go up. He was motivated by relationships. He was motivated by he had a love for basketball, and he didn't want to let his teammates, his coaches, and others down. So I love it, and it kind of leads in how he learned to look. He had emotion, but he used it in a positive way and
I
about
think
how he took a challenge and turned it into something productive. So it leads in to where we want to go right now.
and
And we'll come
I think
back
my
and maybe
favorite
reference this
question
in
when I
just a
do this
minute.
with students is that last one there, Bruce. Why do you think they stormed the court and put him on their shoulders at the end? Obviously it was an incredible accomplishment, like you said, for anybody, but understanding him, understanding what it meant to him, they were so happy for him. And I wish every school had a culture like that school.
Right.
That is just that to me shows this is a school with a good culture.
You're going to have access to everything we're doing today, which is pretty exciting for you. But from that, once someone put down in the chat window, how do you get students to be excited for each other's success? Part of it is just by going through this lesson or any of the WhyTry visual metaphors, but ask the students, how in this class could we let them tell you. You ask that very question, and then we brainstorm it and work on it in the class or in a group or I use it as a counselor in one-on-one counseling. But you can ask that question and have them come together to work on it. So anyway, thank you for you guys are great in the chat window. You're awesome. You're right on it. Okay, we're going to shift into now kind of leading into with some of the things we even saw off the motivation from Jason, but call it the motivation formula. But want to start out, a lot of times when I'm running a group or class or even individual, I'll ask the students, what are some of the positive ways we use water? And I'm just going to go through some slides, but water helps sustain life. Everything you ate or drank today or tonight, last night or in the morning, has its roots in water. And water is recreational and water is cleansing. There's so many good things about water. I love to go to the beach with my family. And that's our one favorite vacation. We boogie board and we build sand castles, but it's therapeutic to be at the beach. And then that looks like they're playing Marco Polo. Kids love to play in water and be in water. But water is great. Again, I couldn't start the day without a shower. And I'm not going to ask you to go in the chat window how many had a shower today, but it just feels so good to start the day being clean. And there's other things that water can do for us. It can cleanse, it can clean things. It's refreshing to drink. It's I think does all kinds of things. This might be one of the biggest reasons. I mean, one of the best things that come from water is hydropower. the production of electricity that comes from a dam and water and turn it into electricity and power. And we'd be here all day if we wanted to talk about all the things we get from power and electricity. So water does a lot of amazing things in our lives. And our bodies are made up of 75% water. At least I think, remembering that from my health class, I don't know if that's exactly right. And so, but water, we have to have it to sustain life. And so it's pretty amazing. But let's do the flip on the flip side. How can water cause negative impact on people? And there's we can list a lot of things, but let's list a few. I asked this, by the way, I asked the students to do this, but right now we're just going to go through and just some of these slides that are obvious, but you're putting it on there, flood and we have flooding all the time and it damages everything in its path. And there's storms, all kinds of things, flooding, hurricanes that cause damage. And here's a place that, it's definitely wiped out. That's Fiji or Hawaii or wherever that is, but they have a lot of water and a lot of damage. And then it can take out a whole road and stop the progression. And you notice, it's the water, usually when you have water or flooding, it's muddy, it's got dirt in it, it's got a lot of things that it's just not clear. It's all been stirred up from the storm. And it can be a mudslide that totally take a house off its foundation. It's pretty devastating. And people are writing down erosion, drowning, stagnant. Just like here, when you have water after a big storm like this or that devastation, has a lot of contamination, pollution in the water. It's not healthy at all. And so it can be really hard. It's not good for us if you just looked at all those things, but we just talked about all the positive things. So this is called the motivation formula. And if you know, there's a storm up in the left-hand corner, and we have the storm represent something, and it represents our challenges. And everybody has challenges. All your students have challenges. I want them to know I have challenges when I'm a teacher or counselor working with them. I have challenges. But challenges can be devastating. They can shut you down. They can take your life, just like drowning with water can take your life. They can just wipe you out where you almost give up, you quit, you shut down, all kinds of things. But also on the flip side, just like water, how can challenges be positive, productive in our lives? This is what I'm really looking forward to. I'd like you to put down whatever you think here, but I'd like to read some of these things. But how challenges can be positive in our lives. And I'd love your response in the chat window. How come if you're going through something that's hard, how can that be a silver lining maybe in that storm? It can help me to grow, learn from, improve, learn how to be strong, can motivate a career change, allows for growth, can give confidence. We learn from them and grow from them. Growth, that's, it helps me to improve. It makes you realize you can do things and survive things. You can do hard things. It shows me that people will support me, that people love me. Inspires creativity and problem solving. A lot of some of the greatest inventions or things or people's accomplishing things have come from a major challenge. And it builds perseverance and grit. And I think it helps us definitely to we learn that we can become resilient or have resilience. And so challenges can be, again, very positive in our lives. So when you're in a challenge, a lot of times there's an emotion, an intense emotion, a lot of times frustration, fear, anger, what other emotions. And with that emotion, sometimes they're very intense, there comes energy. A lot of times you're right initially in the challenge, then that emotion's there, you have energy. And so this is hard when we're going through it. It's easy to talk about it, but we have a choice. When you're in that challenge and you're feeling that emotion, that energy, you can choose how you're going to channel that energy. If you look at this visual, it has the water from the challenge is come in such a tense amount. There's a flooding, floods over, but also it goes through these four dams or reservoirs in a positive direction. So you can choose to take your challenge and channel it in a positive direction, or you can choose to take it in a negative direction. And maybe we don't think we're choosing when we go in a negative direction. Sometimes it just feels like where you go when it's so hard. And I know our family my daughter was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and she went in the flood zone, but as a family, because we love her, we kind of went with her. And it was really tough, but I won't go through her story, but she wrote a kind of a really nice article, the 9 things she learned that came from that. And by the way, her cancer went into remission. It's a long story. We won't go into the story, but she learned a lot of things you were just talking about over their positive things. But I'd like to talk now. How many of your students, when they have a major challenge, choose or just definitely go into taken into the flood zone? What does a student look like? How many of your students are gulping for water, just trying to tread water, stay above, but just trying to survive? And here's what a student looks like when they go into the flood zone. They'll take the easiest path to least resistance. They're not going to put a lot of effort. They have a lot of apathy. They kind of give up, sometimes shut down, quit. They don't feel good about themselves. Energy dies. And what I've seen over and over again, a lot of times they're hurting so much, they hurt themselves and hurt others. And they lash out. And a lot of times they also just give up and just quit. And when they lose out on opportunity and freedom, I tell students, if we're all honest or we're watching today, how many of you don't have to put this in the chat window, but how many of you have been in the flood zone in your life? Maybe something recent or you're going through something now. I have a good friend that's going through something really major with a family member, and he's in the flood zone. So it doesn't stop just with your students, it goes throughout our lives. But I've been in the flood zone. Worked with students in the flood zone, but I tell them you can visit the flood zone, but you can't stay there. You can't live there. I used to call this kind of victimville. We have some people that stay in the flood zone all their life. And that way, our goal, that we're striving in WhyTry and as adults supporting students is to help them come out of that flood zone. And so one of the best ways we do that is see that lifeline, that we as adults can extend them that lifeline and help them come out. That's one of my favorite things, is to help a student knowing that they're struggling with a challenge, but to give them actual tools and strategies and just establish a relationship that they know I'm there for them and believe in them. So we ask students, what are your lifelines? Who can help you out of the flood zone at home? And sometimes that's a parent. Sometimes that's a sibling. Sometimes that's a grandparent. We have one of my grandson is struggling a bit. I'm spending extra time and doing activities with him just to try to give him greater support. But I'm his grandpa, not his dad or his mom. But how can we help, at home? The next one is at school. How can we as teachers, counselors, social workers, psychologists, administrators, directors, whatever your role is, can we extend that lifeline and truly help students get them back in that channel where they can go through these 4 reservoirs and dams, which we teach positive skills and strategies to help them to deal and cope with their challenge. And then the very last one, with your peers. Sometimes I call it a true friend, but your true friends that really care about you, they'll be there for you. They'll help you. But we want students to know they got to reach out. They got to take advantage of their lifelines. And so this visual, I have to be totally honest, I get so stoked teaching it. And it's one of my favorite things to use with students. And it's changed my life as an educator. I just want to tell one experience and we'll move on. When we were teaching this, and I had a young lady that had her mom called the principal and said, "Do you have anybody that can work with my daughter? She's getting all D's and F's. She'd shut down. She'd quit. She's in the flood zone." And her name was Emily. I'm just going to make this really short. I got her in for a counseling session. I worked totally on the first session on the relationship. But the second time she came back, I showed her this visual. I said, "Emily, where do you see yourself?" She said, "They call me Coach B or Mr. B." She said, "Mr. B, I see myself in the flood zone." She says, "I'm gulping and drowning in the flood zone." I said, "With your permission, I would love to help you come out." And she said, I would give anything to come out. And then we went through a process and taught the other things that we have to help her come out. And her mom came to school the very next day and said, what did you do with my daughter? She's my old Emily again. She was an honor roll student, and her dad had passed away. And she'd gone in the flood zone. She'd just given up. And mom came in and said, I don't know what you shared with her. And I pulled this out, the motivation form, and shared it with her. She said, I've had her in therapy, but she understood this and it made sense to her. And I asked her, well, how did you make changes? And when someone asked her that, she said, I just decided I needed to come out of the flood zone. So anyway, there's a lot of good personal stories. Okay, let's go. We can go to the next slide. This is just to river an example of what we already talked about, but water will always find the least resistance, find a way where it will funnel itself and channel itself and go, just like students will take the least resistance when they're in a challenge or in the flood zone. And what we had at one of the bottom of the things was sometimes when students are struggling so much, they hurt themselves or hurt others. If you're coming along a line and can't see this road is collapsed down and don't see it, that's going to be a disaster. A lot of times students, when they're so down and hurt, they lash out at themselves or at others, and it's devastating.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, sometimes they, you know, when they're struggling and they're in the flood zone, they cause damage that's collateral damage, right? It's not just impacting them alone. It impacts
Right.
their family and everybody around them. And, you know, sometimes things like this happen when there's a flood in nature. And, you know, if you didn't know this had happened, this could be life-threatening. It could be dangerous. You know, and that's the reality, I think, with a lot of the kids that we work with. There's sometimes just collateral damage and it's impacting the environment, not just them.
Right. And as these shows, you can't go anywhere when the flood comes. You can't, your cars are stuck. They can't move forward. You have to get out of the flood zone to move on.
It's hard to
Or-
get out. So, one of the things we wanted to share with you. So, this is kind of as we walk through this metaphor, we get through to this point where we talk about lifelines with our students. Oftentimes, when we do training and we're kind of presenting this to educators, to people like yourselves, we show a little bit different version right here. We have a message here that includes this term. We call it surrendering the one-up relationship. And, you know, I often say the motivation formula kind of has two parts to it. One part is what can we do to motivate our students? And then the other part is how can we teach them to be intrinsically motivated, to, you know, to be self-motivated. And so this lifeline being thrown to the kid in the flood zone there, like Bruce mentioned, it represents every one of us. You know, what are we doing to become a lifeline to those kids that we work with, a support, a connection for them. And, you know, when we first started creating the WhyTry program, we went through and we created all these different metaphors that teach these different skills. We call them the skills of resilience. You know, everything is driving towards helping build resilience in our students. And I was asking Christian one day, I wanted to know, what do you do when kids come into your office? How do you get them to, you know, listen to you and engage with you? I feel like there's something missing. And it was kind of from that conversation and another conversation that we were having where Christian was kind of venting to me about how he was working with these kids as a clinical social worker. And he was frustrated because he felt like he'd make progress with them and then they'd go home and they'd have to go back to their family or their friends. And a lot of that progress would just go out the window. And he was just venting frustration that he couldn't get rid of their problems, their challenges. And I remember kind of laughing at him and saying, Christian, I may not be a social worker, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to get rid of their challenges. And he's like, I know, but it's hard to, you know, you want to take that away. And so we started talking about, well, what can we do? If we can't get rid of their challenges, how can we help them? And it started with this motivation formula. And then this piece right here called surrendering the one-up relationship was kind of what Christian was sharing with me. He would say, you know, I'd say, what do you do? Like, if I could be a fly on the wall and watch you, I think I could start listing some of the things I'm observing you do. And then somebody like me, maybe I could do what you're doing. Or any of you on this webinar, you could do what Christian does. And so, and it was all about how he's making that connection with them. And so one of the things he said, he goes, sometimes I let him sit in my chair, and he would have this big soft leather chair that was his, comfortable chair that he bought so that he could have a soft place, comfortable place to sit in his office most of the day. And um, and the kids would come in, they'd have kind of a hard plastic chair they'd normally have to sit on. And he said, I'd usually let him sit in my chair, and I'd call it the expert's chair. And I said, why would you do that? And he goes, well, I'd say, we're talking about you. You're the expert. Nobody knows more about you than you do. So I think you should sit in this chair. This is the expert's chair. And I said, that's cool that you're doing that. What's your reasoning behind it? He goes, I feel like every kid that I'm working with, they're always on the losing end of every relationship. They're one down and everybody's one up. I'm the therapist, they're the client. They're down here, I'm up here. Their friends, their teacher, the principal, their parents, the judge, whatever the case was with these kids, they were always kind of on the losing end of every relationship. And so, for lack of a better term, that's what we started calling it, this idea of surrendering the one-up relationship. And it really just is a term that means that we're communicating that they have value and worth, and it's unconditional. It's that kind of unconditional positive regard that we establish with our students. And so we started coming up with a list of things that Christian would do in a one-on-one setting. And then we realized some of those don't quite work in a group or classroom setting. So we were looking at some of the best educators that we had been training and working with, and that we had become friends with all over the country, and started observing and getting their thoughts and their ideas of things that they do to communicate to their students how they feel about them. And for us, it all comes down to that relationship. We know that it's the relationship that we establish with our students that is the key factor in motivating those difficult to reach kids. If you're trying to engage and motivate, it's so much more important that they know, that we care about them and we believe in them. And it's something that we all know, and I think recognize in education that it's important, but we often hear it talked about, and rarely is anybody saying how to do it. It's mostly just, yeah, this is important, but how can we do this? And a caring relationship has potential to reverse absenteeism, increase motivation, create school cultures where students show up not because they have to, but because they want to. And in one of our metaphors, so the motivation formula is one. This is one that's a part of a metaphor we call the reality ride, and it's teaching, helping our students improve their decision making and understanding how the choices they're making are having consequences in their future. And as part of this, we talk about challenges at home, at school, and with peers. And whenever we talk about challenges at school, we get a lot of different answers like, it's boring, I don't like it, I don't understand why I have to be here. But the number one answer I always hear when we ask that question is they'll say, my teachers don't like me. And I've been throwing that out to educators for the last 20 years. Is that true? Do we really not like our students? And I'm confident. I mean, I've trained thousands of educators, trained in all 50 states. And in my experience, the vast majority, I'd say in the high 90, 95 percentile do care about and like their students. I mean, I think we can all think of a teacher that makes us wonder why they're in education, but the vast majority do care and they do like their students. But if that's the number one thing that students say when you ask that question, that's evidence of a problem that exists. We're not effectively communicating how much we care about them. And so that's where it comes down to this relationship. So many studies have been done talking about the importance of positive teacher-student relationships, and that accumulatively they all are linked to improvements in almost every metric that schools care about and value: higher academic engagement, better attendance, improved grades, fewer disruptive behaviors, suspensions, lower dropout rates. And it doesn't just impact students, it impacts us as educators, right? The impact of positive relationships on teachers is equally important. There was a study by the European Journal of Psychology of Education found a teacher's relationship with students was the best predictor of how much a teacher experienced joy versus anxiety in class. And I think all of us that are educators would agree with that and can relate to that. And so we wanted to just share, we have this whole series of strategies, 150, 200 different practical strategies of things that we can do to be intentional in how we form those relationships with our students that are part of the WhyTry curriculum, part of what we do in training, part of our tools and resources. But today we wanted to share three of our favorites, some that are really simple with you. So, three ways to be intentional in relationship building. First one, know every student's name and use it often, right? Greet students by name at the door, use their names during class, in the hallway. Small act has a huge impact. You want to share anything on this, Bruce?
Yeah, I'll just share one thing. One thing I did a little bit different, but I can sometimes notice students that were really struggling and or whatever, and I always would say I knew their name, but sometimes I mispronounce it. So I would tell them, if I mispronounce your name, I'm going to bring you your favorite candy bar tomorrow. So I'd mispronounce that student's name, and I said, I say that right? No, and then tell me how to say it, and I'd practice it and say it right. But the next day, they were shocked when I came with the candy bar they told me they wanted. That made a huge difference. And every once in a while, I missed the name on purpose. I just wanted to have the experience to bring them candy bar, and that kind of created a bond. But just that's there's a lot of research behind that. Just that's one of the number one things you can do is to really know their name and act like you're excited to see them and use it often.
Love it. Um, I was doing a training a few months ago in Indiana, and I was at a high school and a middle school, and they were talking about how at the beginning of the school year they had all of their students, pictures of all their students, and they went through and they had all their staff in a meeting go up and put their name next to any student that they saw on the board that they felt they had a personal connection with, and that they knew that that student felt that personal connection. It wasn't just on the teacher side, but it was the student side. And they realized there was a bunch of students that had multiple teachers that had personal connections with them. Some of them that had only one teacher that had a personal connection with them, and some of them that they knew that didn't have a name next to them, that nobody really knew the student, and they didn't feel that that student probably feels a personal connection with any individual. And I love how the principal shared with me. She said, the staff, I didn't even have to say anything. They all just immediately started volunteering that I'm gonna be intentional and go form a connection with this student or this student or this student. And that was kind of their goal at the beginning of the year, was to get to know them and make sure there wasn't one student that was lacking at least one connection with a caring adult, a teacher, counselor, any kind of staff member that knew them and knew their name, and that the student felt it on their end. Um, Passion presentation. This is one, we've done this a lot. Bruce and I have taught a lot of classes to kids. We both train and have been working with WhyTry for the last 2 decades almost. And we've taught lots of classes together. We still try to go in and work with kids and stay fresh. And one of our favorite things to do is we would do a passion presentation, share with our students a little bit about us so they could get to know us, and then have them be assigned at different times throughout the year to share their passion, what they love, and what their interests are. Any examples on this you wanted to share,
I've
Bruce?
had so many breakthroughs with students we have with the passion presentation. I'm just going to share one quick, but there was a young lady in our WhyTry class. Someone put in the chat window, that they were one of the kids, or the kid, the head down and quiet, and never. We had a young lady by the name of Debbie that she had a D- average, and she never had her head down most of the time, never participated, never said anything. And we were signing putting on the calendar when kids in our class were going to do a passion presentation on something they love or care about. And she said, I'm not doing it. I don't have anything I like. There's no way you can make me do this. We said, we don't want to make you. You have to choose. But so I tried to encourage her, and she said, no way, Mr. B. You can't make me do that. I said, we're not going to you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, got closer to the passion presentation. I said, Debbie, isn't there something you like, something you really care about? She says, I don't like anything. I said, I can't believe that. What do you do during the summer or whatever? She says, well, I do ride horses. I said, well, tell me more about that. Well, I have a horse named Root Bear. Well, tell me more about Root Bear. And I'm in a rodeo club. I do barrel riding with Root Bear. Pretty soon I said, well, just come to class, bring the bridle or a pitcher of root beer, and are you on root beer or whatever, and just tell why you like riding horses. Her dad shocked us all, brought root beer to school. About out of the trailer, he brought root beer. We went out, got root beer out, and she told about root beer. But then I got a little bit in trouble because I said, "Let's go out by the football field." There was some dirt field out there, and let's see you ride root beer and do your riding routine or whatever you normally do. And so we went out. It's a whole class. Took a little longer than most passion presentations. From that time forward, students were clapping. It was so exciting. She lit up. And that from that time forward, it was a process. It took about a term. She started moving outside of herself, head up, participating. And 2 terms later, she was a B+ student, not a D- student. And there was other things that happened, other key people, but I really believe the springboard was the passion presentation and root beer and her showing that.
Love that. I love that. Um, Last one, just the third one here. Notice and comment. If you notice new shoes, a different hairstyle, or a shirt with their favorite band, say something. It shows you're paying attention and that you care. Um, it's amazing, just those little observational things that help make that connection and help them see that you see them. Help, it's a recognition in their part that you see them when you just point something out about something that's changed in them or something that, you know, could be related to their appearance. It could be related to an action or something that they did that you call out and just say, that was really nice. I like that you did that. Or, I saw that. I noticed, I saw what you did there. To me, I think that is just one of those really small, simple things. But when we're intentional about recognizing something positive about our students or personal about our students, it just goes such a long way in helping create that connection where they know we like them, we care about them because we're paying attention to them. Anything else on that, Bruce?
No, I mean, I know in our area we have, 9 ski resorts now, and sometimes kids would wear skiing apparel or something related to, and I say, what, do you snowboard or ski? That just anything to get in, or sports teams, a cat, jersey or hat. That's it. Wait, anything that you pay attention to what they like or what they're doing, and it's just what you're talking about, but it's good.
So we're short on time now. We've been going through this. I want to just make sure you guys know what we've got here. So, uh, we've got another activity. We won't go through it with you, but it's in the lesson. We've got a little observation activity that's kind of, these are what we call resilience boosters that are part of the lesson. And let me actually exit out here real quick. Well, actually, first, let me do this. If you can follow this QR code, um, and fill this out, we're going to send you to a page where we've got these resources for you. So we have a free lesson plan. It includes a video demonstration of this lesson, how to facilitate it, kind of walking through the visual metaphor and how we process that. 2 different activities in there, that balloon one and this other one called Silver Linings. The presentation deck for this, either a PowerPoint or Keynote file that you can use for that. A copy of our visual metaphor of the motivation formula. The student game plan is kind of a nice thing. It's sort of a worksheet that you could use if you were doing this one-on-one with a student and you wanted to try and teach this to them. It's kind of a worksheet that they can go through and process the metaphor by filling out the questions in this worksheet. And then it would give you a resource. There's a facilitator's guide to go along with that, that is a resource that you can use once they've filled it out to kind of process their answers and talk about, how this relates to what's going on in their life. And then we have a parent guide to go along with this lesson as well. So it's a parent resource that you can share with parents if you're taking this and you want to teach this lesson, and then have parents be aware of what it is that you're teaching in this, the skills, and why this is important for you in class and why it's important for their children. And then some resources in there for them to help kind of reinforce and support some of the stuff that we're doing when we teach these classes or these lessons in a school setting, that the parents can reinforce and support that at home. And so if you fill out that QR code, we will share, we'll take you to a page that has all of these resources. Let me, I think I can show you the page real quickly here. Yeah, it's going to be a page like this that has all the resources here. So you've got the lesson plan you can download, a demo video of this that's down at the bottom, um, a kind of an explanation of the lesson here, and then you've got your presentation decks, the game plan. There's a document here that's the 3 ways to be intentional at building relationships. So a little bit more what we were just sharing with there, some ways for surrendering the one up. The video of uh, Jason McElwain that Bruce just was sharing with you is right here. The visual metaphor motivation formula, the balloon activity, and this activity silver lining, and the resilience booster, and then the resource for parents. All of those are right here linked in this for your lesson that you can use as just a sample. We want you to try this out and see what you like. Um, let me see. I will share this. Sorry, this link's the one I want here. Copy. I'll put it in if the QR code's not working, here is a link in the chat window that you can go to where we can share that with you. So if that QR, if you're having a hard time with the QR code, just click on that link and it should take you to the same form. And we are just so grateful that you all joined us today. We're so grateful for the work that you do. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced one of my good friends or someone I've trained that is just an amazing educator, and they come from a background where they've had a lot of difficulties and struggles as a child and going through school, and they've accomplished amazing things. They've overcome a lot of challenges in their life, and almost every single one has a story of one caring adult, a teacher, a counselor, somebody in their journey through their education experience that was just there for them in a key moment that made a difference. And I believe so strongly in the influence that one caring adult can have on a kid. And it doesn't have to be this big, grandiose sacrifice on our part. And so um, we just want to thank you all for the work that you do. It's our organization's mission and our passion to try and support that work in any way that we can to create tools and resources to help you be more effective and be intentional at how you create those relationships that can motivate and reach these kids